Starting in late 1862, several major battles take place which will greatly shape the outcome of the war. The first of these will take place in the town of Fredericksburg in December of 1862. Fredericksburg lies about halfway between the opposing capitals, Richmond, Virginia, and Washington, D.C. Robert E. Lee's force has grown to 74,000 men. He'll face off against Ambrose Burnside with about 113,000. The geography here is important. If you travel from east to west and cross the Rappahannock River, you're going uphill. You go through the town of Fredericksburg and then reach gently rising hills. Lee's forces have become entrenched on those hills. It'll be a great position for him if the battle comes. The Union attacks across the river. As this painting shows, it's a difficult task to span that river. You build these pontoon bridges, which is tough on a good day. It's very tough when you're under enemy fire. Military historians would say this battle may be Lee's finest hour. He will inflict twice as many casualties on the Union Army as his group will receive. Lincoln, once again in frustration, changes leaders. He replaces Burnside with General Joseph Hooker, a character in his own right. The next major battle takes place near the town of Chancellorsville, which is not very far from Fredericksburg. This battle will take place in May of 1863. Smaller Confederate forces led by General Lee would defeat General Hooker. There are 30,000 total casualties. Again, this is hard to realize, but any of these major battles taken alone would be a major war. There are bad results for the Confederacy, even though they do achieve an amazing victory. The first is devastating. Stonewall Jackson is killed. The story is that Jackson is on patrol one night. He comes back and gives the wrong password. One of his own sentries shoots him. Now, he's not killed right away, but he does lose an arm. With medical care being what it is, he will die a couple of days later due to complications from having the arm removed. There are 3 markers near Chancellorsville that commemorate this event. The first, this is not his grave. This marks the spot out in the woods where he was actually shot. The second one is his grave near Chancellorsville. The third one's bizarre. Remember, they cut off his arm. This marker marks the spot where his arm is buried. In a separate location, it says the arm of Stonewall Jackson. The second result is also bad. Robert E. Lee once again will decide to invade the North. That decision, by the way, is made a little easier because of the situation on the ground. The northern blockade is taking effect. Inflation is rampant. Mobile is a good example. Mobile faced the blockade. In the port city in 1860, a gallon of molasses would sell for 28 cents. By this time in 1863, that same gallon would cost over $7. Strategic points were falling. Confederate capitals, port cities, one by one, were getting picked off by the North. As the South struggled to keep pace, the North was getting stronger. More recruits, more volunteers, more manufacturing. Those advantages we looked at as this war became longer were starting to kick in. That would call for desperate action. Lee decides to invade the North again. Several reasons. The capital is under siege. It's like a chess match. If Lee pulled around toward Pennsylvania, he's bound to be followed. That would take pressure off Virginia. They could live off the land, much as they had tried to do in Maryland. They would force Union troops to leave the West and come pursue them into the North. It also has a political effect. In the North, you've got a group called Peace Democrats. They're sometimes called Copperheads. Lee thought, and Jefferson Davis thought, if they make this move into the North and the Northern folks saw the war firsthand, that might make this peace movement even stronger in the North. Also there, again, they can't get over this fact. They've got to achieve a victory on northern soil. They need a big move to encourage England and or France to jump in the war. This might be their last chance. If they can pull this off, it's a clear path to Washington, D.C. They could attack the nation's capital from the north and from the south. That would lead to the most famous of all Civil War battles, the Battle of Gettysburg. The invasion of the North was a massive undertaking. Lee would enter the state with 75,000 men. As he moved to the north, as he believed would happen, he's pursued by the Union Army. They've got about 90,000 men, this time under General George Meade. The problem was Lee is marching blind. Normally, you've got a cavalry force in front to do reconnaissance. You wouldn't think you could lose 90,000 men, but you can. He doesn't know exactly where the Union Army is. As a result, the Battle of Gettysburg will start by accident as these two armies literally bump into each other. Realize they're not going north with the intention of invading Gettysburg. Gettysburg is just a small town where roads cross. It becomes famous because of what happens there. It's not the original destination. The Battle of Gettysburg is a three-day battle that will take place on July 1st, 2nd, and 3rd of 1863. The geography in and around the town is also fairly important. You've got, first of all, the town of Gettysburg, kind of in a valley between two ridges of hills. It's kind of confusing. On the eastern side, you've got what's called Cemetery Ridge. On the western side, you've got Seminary Ridge, named for a seminary, a university that's in the town along that ridge. On that first day of battle, the Confederates are actually north of town. They will attack from the north a smaller Union force. The Union soldiers will retreat through the town and take positions along Cemetery Ridge. That will actually help them as the battle takes place, because you always in battle want the high ground. The Confederate forces on that first day had the advantage, but as is often the case, they didn't press the attack. That gave the Union forces time to reinforce all during the night. By the next morning, the force they face is much larger than what they would have faced had they attacked on day one. On day two, General Lee orders Longstreet to clear the Union forces off Cemetery Ridge. The plan would be to charge up Little Round Top and try to flank the Union Army and disrupt the entire line. There's fighting in places which now are famous because of the battle, places like the Peach Orchard, the Wheat Field, and Devil's Den. This photo shows some of the boulders in Devil's Den. This made great hiding places for sharpshooters, made it very tough to charge up those small hills. The most important fighting took place on a hill called Little Round Top. There's a great story of a Union officer named Joshua Chamberlain. Chamberlain was in the 20th Maine. In a previous life, he was an English professor at Bowdoin College in Maine. At a crucial point in the battle, he orders a textbook charge down the hill, which historians now say probably saved that day and may have saved the entire Union Army, which in turn saved the Union. This marker today marks the spot on Little Round Top where Chamberlain's forces held the line that day. Day 3 at Gettysburg has often been called the high water mark of the Confederacy. In retrospect, this is the last chance the South would have to realistically win this war. General Longstreet and General Lee disagree on what to do. Longstreet wants to pursue the same course that had failed the day before, which is to try to flank the Union left at Little Round Top and attack the line from south to north. Robert E. Lee has a strange idea. He wants to attack the Union line at its center. Why would he do this? He believes that General Meade expects an attack either on the left flank or perhaps on the right. He would think that if he thought that, he would fortify the flanks and leave the center exposed. That might be the weakest part of the entire line. At 1 o'clock, an artillery barrage begins with dozens of Confederate guns trying to soften up that line for the attack that's soon to come. At 3 o'clock, General George Pickett of Virginia led 13,000 men out of the woods and across an open field into heavy fire from the Union line. This turned out to be a disaster because the Union line was strong in the middle also. After the attack failed and the men stumbled back down that hill, Lee was heard to say, "It's all my fault." He had expected too much of his men. This would prove to be the major turning point in the war. For the next 2 years, the war goes on, but I contend it's never in doubt again who will win. It's just a matter of how long will this last. The numbers from the three-day battle tell the story. You've got 50,000 combined casualties, making this no doubt the biggest battle of the war. The results of Gettysburg are very important. To this day, it's the largest battle ever fought in the Western Hemisphere. It's the last time Robert E. Lee would try to invade the North. He's tried it twice, once at Antietam, once at Gettysburg. Both failed, and both would be disastrous failures. There's no follow-up by the Union Army. Lincoln is once again beside himself because had Meade pursued Lee's army, the war might have ended in the next couple of days. As a result of not pursuing, it will last 2 more years. It is no doubt the final hope of European recognition. Any talk of recognition after Gettysburg is just wishful thinking. The Confederacy, for the next 2 years, they're on the run. They do make it back to Virginia, but for the next 2 years, they will win a few battles, but as far as a chance to win the overall war, there's not much hope of that. At the same time the Battle of Gettysburg is going on, the siege at Vicksburg is coming to a head. The siege, as we saw, started in December of 1862. By May of 63, Grant has twice tried to attack the city, and both times it's failed. Finally, on July the 4th, 1863, the day after Gettysburg ended, Vicksburg surrendered. Why is that big? Now the river is completely in Union control. You've already lost New Orleans and Natchez. Vicksburg was the last big stronghold. Grant was recognized finally as the man Lincoln needs. After changing generals several times, Ulysses S. Grant is recognized as a fighter. There's a great story about Grant. In the Army, sometimes your junior officers, they're kind of jealous. They want to rise up and pass you in promotions. Some of the guys under Grant sent Lincoln a letter saying General Grant drinks way too much. They were hoping to sabotage his career so they might leapfrog over him. When Lincoln got that letter, he liked Grant. He sent word back to these guys, look, you find out what it is this man drinks, and you drink it too. The point being, this guy's a winner. This is the guy that Lincoln wanted. You combine Vicksburg and Gettysburg. These are called the twin defeats. It demoralized the South. These are blows from which they would never recover.